Every year, thousands of cruise passengers come home from the trip of a lifetime looking greener than the palm trees they just sailed past. Not from seasickness, from the buffet. The same buffet they paid $5,000 to stand in front of twice a day while wearing a lanyard and calling it a vacation. Cruise ships like to sell you paradise, unlimited food, ocean views, waiters who remember your name by day 2. What they leave out of the brochure is the part where your shrimp cocktail has been sitting out since 7 a.m. The soft serve machine has not been properly cleaned since embarkation day. And somewhere in the galley, a crew member is refilling a fruit tray that has not been washed since the last sailing. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has an entire dedicated program just for tracking illness outbreaks on cruise ships. Not hotels, not resorts. Cruise ships specifically, because it happens consistently enough to need its own system. Let that float around in your mind for a moment. Today we are going through 6 specific foods you should never eat on a cruise ship, not because they look suspicious, but because of what is actually happening to them before they reach your plate. Stay until the end, because number 4 is the one that even experienced cruisers walk right past every single time. And if you want more content that the industry hopes you never find, subscribe right now, because we are just getting started. Let's kick things off with the item that sends more cruise passengers to the ship's medical bay than almost anything else on board. The buffet seafood station. You walk onto the Lido deck. The ocean is right there, and in the center of the buffet is a mountain of chilled shrimp, crab legs spread across crushed ice, and raw oysters glistening as if they had been pulled from the sea an hour ago. Here is what you need to know. On a 7-day cruise, the seafood you are eating on day 3 may have been loaded onto that ship before you even packed your bags. It was sourced in bulk before departure, frozen below deck, thawed, displayed, and in many cases, pulled back, re-chilled, and displayed again the following day. Former galley workers from multiple major cruise lines have described how the cold seafood buffet regularly sat out for 2 to 3 hours without being rotated, especially during peak lunch and dinner rushes when there was simply no time to follow the schedule. One ex-crew member from a ship operating out of Miami described watching crab legs come back from the buffet line and go straight into the cooler with the fresh stock. Not into the bin, into the fresh stock. Because throwing food away at sea costs money, and there is no health inspector walking through the door at random. The FDA says shellfish is unsafe between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit after more than 2 hours. A buffet line running from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. is not meeting that standard by the 8th hour. And then there are the oysters. Raw oysters on a cruise ship buffet are possibly the single riskiest thing you can voluntarily put in your body while on vacation. They filter and concentrate bacteria from the water they grow in. They are sitting in half-melted ice that has been there since breakfast. And they have been breathed on, hovered over, and handled by every person who walked past and thought about taking one before putting it back. A passenger returning from a sailing to the Bahamas described it as the worst illness of her adult life. Raw oyster station, night 2. She posted her review online, and 3 other guests from the same voyage showed up in the comments with identical symptoms. One commenter wrote, "You paid to take a cruise and the cruise gave you one in return." Another said, "That oyster had a return ticket and it used it." The seafood station is built to impress. The more impressive it looks, the longer it has probably been sitting there. Beautiful and safe have never formally introduced themselves on a cruise ship buffet. Now let's sail over to something that lives on every pool deck on the planet, runs 24 hours a day, and has not been properly taken apart since before you boarded. The soft serve machine. It just sits there, free and constant. A little swirl of vanilla and chocolate that makes you feel like the vacation is paying for itself. And it might be the single germiest surface on the entire ship. The FDA food service guidelines require soft serve machines to be fully disassembled and deep cleaned every 24 hours. That means taking apart the tubing, the mixing chambers, the nozzles, sanitizing every single surface, and taking the machine offline while you do it. On a ship running 3 pool deck venues for several thousand passengers, that process gets abbreviated. And abbreviated, according to former cruise food and beverage workers, means it barely happens at all. One former crew member from a ship operating in the Caribbean described the soft serve machines as some of the most neglected equipment on the entire vessel. Surface wipe at the end of the day, nothing more. On a 7-day sailing, the internal components of that machine, the parts touching every cone and cup that passes through it, may go the entire voyage without being properly sanitized. What grows in there? Listeria, primarily. Cold, wet, dairy-rich environments are exactly where it thrives. Listeria is especially dangerous for elderly passengers, pregnant women, and young children. Those 3 groups make up a very large portion of every cruise ship manifest. In recent years, multiple Listeria outbreaks have been traced directly back to commercial soft-serve machines at food service locations. And then there is the handle itself. Every hand on the pool deck touches that lever. Wet hands, hands fresh from the water, kids who just came from the bathroom. One person posted on a cruise travel forum that they watched a child sneeze directly onto the soft serve handle. 2 adults used it straight after without wiping anything. A crew member walked over, refilled the machine, and left without touching the handle. A reply underneath said that the machine is a community biology experiment with a chocolate setting. The midnight soft serve feels like a bonus. Your digestive system might call it something else entirely. If this is already making you think twice about that pool deck dessert, hit like right now. It keeps this channel running. Now let's keep going because we are just warming up. Breakfast on a cruise is supposed to be the uncomplicated one. Ocean outside your window, bottomless coffee, a plate of scrambled eggs. Simple, safe, normal. Those eggs have probably been in that chafing dish since before your alarm went off. Liquid egg product is the industry standard across large-scale food service, and cruise ships are no exception. Not fresh cracked eggs. Cartons of pasteurized liquid egg are cooked in massive batches in the galley, loaded into chafing dishes, and placed on the buffet line, where they sit under a heat lamp for as long as the morning service runs. On most ships, that is about 5 hours. The safe holding window for cooked eggs is 2 hours. After that, you are entering salmonella territory. Former cruise galley workers have described breakfast buffets where chafing dishes ran continuously from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. without once being emptied, cleaned, and properly restarted. New batches were scooped on top of old batches, old mixed with new, no one tracking when anything started or how long it had been sitting there. One worker from a ship based out of Fort Lauderdale called it a scrambled egg river. It just kept flowing. Nobody knew the source. Nobody asked. A reviewer sailing out of Barcelona wrote that they watched a woman serve herself from the exact same tray 4 hours after the reviewer first walked past it at breakfast. The color was grayish. The texture looked like wet insulation foam. She seemed completely unbothered. I was bothered enough for both of us. Another commenter replied that those eggs had already filed for early retirement. If you want eggs on a cruise, find the live cooking station and watch someone make them in front of you. Fresh, cooked to order, made while you stand there. That is the only version worth eating. The ones in the chafing dish are not breakfast. They are a recurring complaint waiting to be submitted. Now, number 4. The one we told you to wait for. And the reason it surprises people is because it looks like the premium option. Cruise lines have spent years investing in specialty dining, and the sushi buffet is the showpiece. Carefully arranged rolls, fresh-looking fish, elegant presentation. Passengers walk past it and think, this is where the quality is. This is the smart choice. Raw fish on a cruise ship is not the smart choice. It is a gamble with a very confident dealer. Sushi-grade fish requires a precise cold chain from catch to plate. It must be frozen to specific temperatures to kill parasites, then held at near freezing temperatures without interruption right up to the moment it is served. Any break in that chain creates risk. Any delay, any temperature fluctuation, any moment where the fish sits outside that narrow window, and the margin for safety disappears fast. On a ship moving through the ocean, serving thousands of passengers and running a high-volume self-service buffet, that chain is extremely difficult to maintain perfectly. And with raw fish, imperfect is not an acceptable result. A former sushi chef from a major cruise line described the reality in a food service industry forum. The fish came in on port day. By day 3, it was still on the station. Corporate policy said if it was within the use-by window, it was cleared for service. But those windows were set generously. And when you are generous with raw fish on a ship, the guest is the one who pays for it. Beyond the sourcing issue, the self-service format destroys whatever safety margin remains. The display looks perfect at the start of service. Within an hour, ice melts, the fish at the front has warmed up, and every guest is using the same utensils that have been resting in room temperature food since the station opened. The guest at hour 2 is eating fish that has been out longer than the guest at hour 1. Nobody is tracking that difference. Nobody has time. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention specifically recommends that elderly passengers, pregnant women, immunocompromised guests, and young children avoid raw fish entirely on cruise ships. When a federal health agency publishes guidance that's specific about an environment, there is a documented pattern behind it. Take the photo of the sushi display. It is genuinely a beautiful photo. Then go find something that was cooked recently, ideally in front of a witness. Now let's talk about the item on the buffet that everyone grabs when they are trying to make the responsible choice. The fruit station. Colorful, fresh-looking, healthy. The thing you point to when someone asks if you are eating well on the ship. Pre-cut fruit is one of the highest risk items on the entire buffet, and almost nobody knows it. The moment fruit is cut, the protective skin is gone. The exposed flesh is moist, sugary, and warm, and bacteria treat it like a 5-star resort. Cut fruit must be held below 41 degrees Fahrenheit to stay safe. In a ship's dining room, sitting in a display tray with no active refrigeration underneath it, surrounded by the body heat of hundreds of passengers, it is not at 41 degrees. At warmer temperatures, bacteria on exposed fruit flesh can double in population every 20 minutes. The fruit was cut in the galley starting around 4 in the morning. It was loaded into display trays. Throughout service, staff refill those trays by placing fresh product on top without cleaning the tray in between. New melon lands in the same juice residue left by the old melon that was there 3 hours ago. That residue is warm, sweet, and has been sitting open to the air and collecting contributions from every utensil that dipped into it all morning. A 2019 report on shipboard food safety named fresh fruit stations as one of the most consistent sources of passenger illness, citing pre-cut fruit held at unsafe temperatures as a repeating factor across multiple documented outbreaks on multiple cruise lines. One former galley worker from a ship sailing out of Seattle was direct about it. Fruit cutting started at 4 in the morning. By the time breakfast opened at 7, the first fruit cut had been sitting for 3 hours before a single passenger touched it. Lunch was the same trays, just refilled on top of whatever was left. A family of 4 from a sailing out of Galveston all reported stomach problems on day 3. The only food every single member of the family had eaten together was the fruit station at breakfast. The mother wrote in her review that the watermelon looked incredible, so bright and fresh. By that afternoon, she was in the cabin and did not leave until the next morning. A commenter replied that you paid for a Caribbean cruise, and the highlight was a melon that sent your whole family to bed. That is a fruit with a vendetta. Peel your own fruit on a cruise. banana, orange, anything with an intact skin that you break open yourself with your own hands. The moment someone else has cut it and placed it on display, the clock is already running, and you have no idea how long it has been ticking. And finally, let's close with the food nobody questions. The pool deck stations. Hot dogs, burgers, nachos, pizza by the slice sitting in an open tray while you dry off from the pool. Casual food, fun food. The kind of food that feels so obviously harmless that even asking about it seems paranoid. Nothing bad could happen to a hot dog in the Caribbean. Everything bad can happen to a hot dog in the Caribbean. The pool deck is the least controlled food environment on the entire ship. No ceiling, direct sunlight, tropical heat and humidity. And surrounding those food stations all day are hundreds of people fresh from a shared pool. This is not a food service environment. It is an open-air kitchen with no walls, operating in conditions that bacteria consider optimal. Pool deck warming units are harder to maintain at sea than on land. When equipment breaks, there is no technician to call, so crews work around it. A former pool deck worker from a ship operating in the Mediterranean described a warming unit with a faulty temperature sensor that ran at the wrong temperature for an entire 7-day sailing. Everything looked normal from the outside. The sensor was wrong. Hot dogs and burgers came out of that unit every single day. One guest posted after that sailing that the burger I had on day 5 tasted like it was cooked on day 2. He may not have been far off. The nacho cheese deserves a specific warning. This is processed cheese sauce in a warming dispenser on an open pool deck, sitting in tropical heat, touched by hundreds of wet, sunscreen-covered hands throughout the day. Former crew members specifically mentioned the nacho cheese dispenser as something they personally never ate from, even during long shifts when they were genuinely hungry. When the people running the station refuse to eat from it themselves, that is a review worth reading. And the pizza. It was hot when it came out of the oven. That was 45 minutes ago. Now it is sitting open in the tropical heat with an internal temperature that no food safety standard would accept. One passenger from a sailing out of Rome described eating a slice that was warm on the outside and cold in the center. Decided it was probably fine because everything on a cruise is included in the price, and spent the following 36 hours unable to leave their cabin. Their review said, "I should have gone back for the fruit," which, based on everything we just covered, would also have been a mistake. So they really had no good options at that point. The pool deck food exists for one reason: convenience, not safety. And every time those two things disagree on a cruise ship, convenience has better legal representation. So here is the full picture. 6 foods, 1 floating city, and a pattern runs through all of them. The buffet seafood looks like a luxury spread and functions like a bacteria welcome event. The soft serve machine runs 24 hours and gets cleaned approximately once per sailing if you are lucky. The scrambled eggs have been in that chafing dish since before sunrise, and no one has tracked how long. The sushi display is raw fish on a ship, and the CDC has very specific opinions about that. The pre-cut fruit has been sitting in its own warm juice since 4 in the morning. And the pool deck food is outdoor fast food in tropical heat, touched by everyone, monitored by no one, maintained by whatever equipment survived the last voyage. You can have a great cruise. You can eat well on a cruise. But eating well means using your eyes and asking a few questions instead of assuming everything is fine because it came with the ticket price. Find the live egg station. Skip raw oysters and sushi. Peel your own fruit. Walk past the soft serve. And before you pump nacho cheese onto your chips at the pool bar, ask yourself when that dispenser was last cleaned and whose hands have been on it since 8 in the morning. Because when something goes wrong at sea, there is no going home early. There is only the ship's medical bay, a narrow bunk, and a porthole view of the ocean that you are too sick to appreciate. If this changed the way you think about cruise food, drop a comment below and tell us which one surprised you most. And share this with someone who has a sailing coming up. It might genuinely save their trip. Hit like, subscribe, and we will keep showing you what the industry hopes stays below deck. Because the truth is not always on the menu.